The Orioles have traded another reliever ahead of this year's deadline. This time, it's Seranthony Dominguez just walking down the tunnel to join the Blue Jays in exchange for pitching prospect Juaron Watts-Brown. I'll break down the trade from all angles coming up on this live episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, July 29th, 2025, and welcome into this special live evening edition of the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, will be a bit shorter version. We will still have a Wednesday pod that will recap the Orioles doubleheader against the Blue Jays. But we want to talk about the trade that was made between the doubleheader. As Orioles right-handed pitcher Seranthony Dominguez was traded to the Toronto Blue Jays, as the Orioles sent a little cash to Toronto as well, paying some of what's left on Dominguez's deal. And in exchange, the Orioles get pitching prospect Juaron Watts-Brown in basically a one-for-one major leaguer for prospect swap. So let's start with this thing on the Dominguez side. Why did the Orioles trade Seranthony Dominguez? Well, it's what I've been talking about a lot over the past couple of weeks on this show. The Orioles, even though they're playing better baseball and wallop the Blue Jays again this afternoon in game one of the doubleheader, they are still 9 games under 500 and still extremely unlikely they get themselves even close to the playoff race in the final 2 months of the season. They have a lot of rental type players due to be free agents, so it makes more sense to extract value out of them now and trade them away. And I had a list of 3 guys where it was like, you trade them no matter what. Like, these are the 3 guys where you just wait for the best offer and you send it. They were Gregory Soto, Charlie Morton, and Seranthony Dominguez. Soto already dealt to the Mets on Friday for 2 pitching prospects. Charlie Morton just made probably his final Orioles start earlier today. And Dominguez, number 2, is now off the board as well. The O's, there's a chance they could potentially re-sign Dominguez this offseason. It's not out of the question when he becomes a free agent. Mike Elias has given out some shorter-term deals to relievers in free agency, but generally how Elias sees it and how a lot of front offices see it, not a great investment to give out multi-year deals in free agency to relievers. Relievers are so volatile that it's just really tough to predict their performance year over year. I mean, Dominguez was kind of a nightmare in Philly last year. Then he got much, much better coming to Baltimore. He could turn the other direction in 2026. You just don't know. So I think teams are fine giving out 1-year big league deals to relievers. When you start giving out multi-year deals, those are really just too much of an investment in those guys that can be so up and down. It's not really in the Elias category. And Elias and other teams have done a great job of just building a bullpen through prospects and waiver claims and failed starters turned into relievers. And I'm confident they can somewhat replace Seranthony Dominguez. So that's why you trade him away. You try to get the best value. And he goes to the Blue Jays because Toronto is a team that's playing well right now. Yes, they've looked terrible in their first 2 games against the Orioles, which is at least fun for O's fans to see. But they came into this series with the best record in Major League Baseball, had like a 6-game lead over the Yankees atop the AL East. They are looking to get themselves up over the top in their bullpen, although they've had some really good relievers back there. Jeff Hoffman hasn't been as good as they hoped. They've gotten a lot from Brendan Little, although the Orioles got to him the other night. But, besides like Hoffman and Yariel Rodriguez, they've had some tough relievers. And on FanGraphs, the Blue Jays are projected to have just the 20th best bullpen in baseball for the final 2 months of the season. You do not want to go into the playoffs with the 20th best bullpen. That is not a good spot to be in. The reporting around this has been even with the Blue Jays acquiring Dominguez. They are not done. They are still looking for more high-level relief help. I think most people thought the Jays would acquire at least 2 relievers at this year's deadline. And here's number 1. Dominguez, as I talked about on the show last week, probably the best right-handed rental reliever who is out there. Yes, there are other relievers who have team control and are more of closers, but if you're looking for a setup guy who comes fairly cheap, you can't get much better than what Dominguez has done this year. For the Orioles, 41 2/3 innings pitched over 43 games, posting a 3.24 ERA and a 3.47 FIP. Really good strikeout numbers once again for Dominguez, up to 31%. Walk rate's been concerning, just shy of 14%, one of the higher walk rates in baseball, but also one of the higher strikeout rates. So you kind of take both sides of it when you get Dominguez. He's been really, really good lately as well, which has been helpful. You kind of go, if you look back to May 26th. It's actually a pretty good marker because it was right when Dominguez got a save chance when Felix Bautista was not available. You go back to May 26th, Dominguez in that stretch, 23 outings. He's got a 1.14 ERA in that stretch, and striking out 35% of batters and walking 11% of batters. Walks are even down. Opponents hitting just 186 against him. He's also a red-hot reliever at the moment. So the Blue Jays hope they get him over there and he can continue to stay hot and pitch well out of their bullpen. Now, he doesn't set up as like the closer over there. They still really trust Jeff Hoffman and they like Yariel Rodriguez. But Dominguez could really become the main setup guy in Toronto. Now, that depends if they add another high reliever. Apparently, they're really in on Ryan Helsley of the Cardinals right now. But Dominguez is going to handle the 7th and 8th innings for the Blue Jays, and I think generally he will do well. Now, in terms of Dominguez, the other part of his value, although he is a rental, right, he's set to be a free agent after the year, is that he's developed this new pitch this season, right? He had always kind of thrown a little bit of a changeup. It was never great. He found that splitter this year. He's throwing it 17% of the time. It's his number 3 pitch behind his four-seamer at 98 and then that really, really good sweeper. The splitter has been a difference maker for Seranthony Dominguez. Opponents hitting just 114 with a 51% swing and miss rate against that sweeper. Those are absurd numbers. He's got some of the best stuff among relievers that were available at this year's deadline. He's got the big curveball he can go to. But the splitter has allowed Dominguez, who has had some real problems with home runs and some real problems against lefties in his career. Lefties are hitting 160 with a 51% swing and miss rate against the splitter. He's throwing it most of the lefties, even some to righties, and it's just been this huge weapon when he already had a good fastball, when he already had a strikeout weapon against righties with that sweeper. He is now able to go out there and not be a guy who you're trying to play the platoon, right? You're trying to find a spot in the past where Dominguez can face mostly righties. Now, if he goes out there and it's, 2 out of 3 lefties due up in the lineup for his inning, you don't really care because that splitter has been such a good weapon for him that while lefties are still hitting him better this year, it's not nearly the stark difference that it has been in past years. You can still trust him to get some left-handed hitters out, and that makes him even more valuable into the postseason when he's going to be in bigger and bigger spots for the Blue Jays. So, I mean, we wish Dominguez the best, right? Orioles acquired him at the trade deadline last year, and it was a trade that the Orioles undoubtedly won. They sent Austin Hayes over to Philly for Dominguez and Christian Pache, a reserve outfielder who played a couple of games for the Orioles and then was DFA'd. But Hayes was terrible for the Phillies, got injured, got sick, was non-tendered by Philadelphia this offseason. Meanwhile, Dominguez was pretty much the Orioles' closer down the stretch last year. Obviously, they got him. Craig Kimbrell had completely fallen apart. Bautista was still out after Tommy John. And down the stretch last year, Dominguez for the Orioles kind of took over the closer role. He had 10 saves for the O's in his 25 appearances, had a 3.97 ERA, high strikeout rates, lower walk rates than he's posting this year, had a little bit of a home run problem, but otherwise was a trusted reliever down the stretch for Brandon Hyde and pretty much became just a better version of that for the first 4 months of this year. And I think for the Orioles to give up Austin Hayes, who was doing nothing for them and didn't do anything for the Phillies, get 1 year of honestly a really good reliever in Dominguez, and then be able to flip him for another pitching prospect, I call that a win for what the Orioles had done. And they probably predicted, well, he'd be a part of our playoff bullpen in 2025. Playoffs aren't going to happen. You get to the next best thing, and you're able to flip him for a prospect. So who is this prospect, right? The Orioles, in return, getting Juaron Watts-Brown, a 23-year-old right-handed starting pitcher who currently before the trade was at the AA level in the Toronto Blue Jays system. Now, Watts-Brown was the 3rd-round pick for the Blue Jays, 89th overall back in the 2023 draft out of Oklahoma State. We know the Orioles love scouting Oklahoma State. They got the whole Holiday family connection down there, taking a bunch of players from that school. I can guarantee you Elias had Watts-Brown pretty high on his board in 2023, just didn't get a chance to select him, but he gets him now. Watts-Brown, who was actually a pretty high-level transfer in his college career, where he started things at Long Beach State, then went to Oklahoma State for that final year and wasn't that great, but the stuff was amazing, and that's why a team took him 89th overall. Now, Watts-Brown was in high A in 2024, ended the season there, and had some struggles with walks. Like, the stuff was there, But in high A in 2024, he was rolling with a 15% walk rate. That is way too high, especially for that level. So there were some concerns coming into this season. And, as I talk about, love to use the FanGraphs prospect rankings. And the last time that Eric Longenhagen and James Fagan over at FanGraphs ranked the Blue Jays prospects was on April 1st. So basically a couple days after opening day. So they had no data from 2025. They had Watts-Brown all the way down at number 26 in the Blue Jays system as a 40 future value prospect. And Longenhagen writes about him and basically says, look, like it's good stuff, but his write-up was that he had so many walk issues, especially with fastball command in 2024, that he felt he couldn't rank him much higher than 26th in their system. Now, FanGraphs rankings haven't been updated since April 1st. If you look around at the rankings that have been updated, you see the big jump that Watts-Brown has made this year. He began the year again in high A and was just dominant in 8 starts down there. Had a 1.95 FIP in 8 starts. He was working with a 40% strikeout rate to an 8% walk rate. He was clearly too good for high A. So after 8 starts, he got the bump up to double A this season. He hasn't been as dominant in double A, which is to be expected, right? You're going to maybe take some bumps every time you jump up a level in the minor leagues, but he is certainly still held his own. He's made 11 starts in double A so far, 51 2/3 innings, posting a 3.48 ERA and a 3.95 FIP. It's a 37% ground ball rate, so maybe a few fly balls, but the home runs haven't really hurt him. It has been a 24% strikeout rate to a 12% walk rate, so the walk rate has jumped again, not nearly as high as it was last year, but it's been a little bit more of a problem. But double A hitters are hitting just 199 against Watts-Brown so far in these 11 starts. So when you look at MLB Pipeline and you look at Baseball America and where they rank Watts-Brown, while FanGraphs had him 26 at the beginning of the season, Pipeline had him 10th, I believe. Baseball America had him 13th, I believe, in their system. They were much higher, and I have a feeling that when Eric Longenhagen does his new write-up on Watts-Brown, he'll have a much higher outlook on this guy. And the reason why is because he had a big breakout season. He's cut down on the walks, and the stuff has still looked tremendous. Now, what is the stuff that the right-hander has? Well, he's got a four-seam fastball. It's 93 to 94. It's not the biggest fastball. It's not his go-to pitch. And when he has command issues, it's the fastball more than anything else. So that makes you worry because you don't want your number one pitch, your fastball, to be the pitch you struggle to command the most. That's kind of the issue for Watts-Brown. On the flip side, it is 2 absolutely devastating breaking balls. FanGraphs has both his slider and his curveball ranked as a 60 on the 20 to 80 scale. That gets them close to like the elite level of pitches. The slider is like mid-80s. It's got sharp late break. It looks really good and unhittable coming out of his hand. The curveball is more of a bigger, loopier curveball, but he has good command of it. He can kind of land it for a called strike whenever he wants, and he can get a little bit of swing and miss with it against lefties. But the other big jump he's taken this year, besides just the ability to throw more strikes, especially with his fastball, is the changeup. Now, he had always thrown a changeup, and he had a couple of different sliders, like a slower one and then a harder one that people thought might be a cutter. But the big thing is he added the kick change. That's kind of been the new hot pitch this year, a different grip on a changeup to make it move differently. He added that, and his changeup seemingly got better from year to year with adding the kick change. So he's made some adjustments, and they've shown out on the field and on the mound to help him out. And his slider is still great. Sam Dykstra at MLB.com writing, his slider has a 54% swing and miss rate between high A and double A this season, 43% chase rate. Guys just can't hold up even when it's out of the zone. It is a dominant offering. So what does Watts-Brown look like in the future for the Orioles? Well, clearly Toronto still sees him as a starter, and I'll tell you right now, he will probably be in Double-A Chesapeake for the Orioles and will join their rotation. The Orioles will use him as a starter most likely. There is a chance, a lot of these guys have reliever risk, and especially a guy who has some fastball command issues will always have the risk that he'll be a reliever by the time he gets to the big leagues. But right now, he is a starting pitching prospect who's in Double-A, and when I did my episodes a couple of weeks ago talking about, okay, what kind of players should the Orioles target in these deadline trades as sellers, I said they should be targeting starting pitching prospects who are at least in Double-A. That is what Watts-Brown gives you, and of course have had success. Watts-Brown gives you that as well. So while you may compare it to the Gregory Soto return when you got maybe a higher upside prospect in Aracena and you got Cameron Foster, a reliever who's already in AAA and could be knocking on the big league door by the end of this season, you could argue the Orioles got a better return for Gregory Soto. That is possible. Some of that may have to do with the Mets' dire need to get a good left-handed reliever, and maybe they overpaid a bit to get him. But if you see the changes that Watts-Brown has made here in 2025, you can see why the Orioles did a one-for-one deal to go ahead and get him. Because there is a scenario where Watts-Brown finishes this season really strongly at AA, maybe gets a taste of AAA, and at some point a year from now, right, in the second half of next year, we're beating the drum saying Watts-Brown needs to join the Orioles rotation or at the very least join their bullpen at the big league level. And that is the other thing I talked about in what should the Orioles target in these trades. Not only starting pitchers in AA and AAA, but also guys who can help the major league team at some point in 2026. This is a team not going into a rebuild. They're looking to retool and be a good team again next year. And Watts-Brown, who is always already having success in AA, he's 23. He's got major league type stuff, breaking balls. It's not out of the question he could pitch for the Orioles at some point next season. And that is another check in the box of what should the Orioles be looking for and going after when they make these moves this season. Baseball America said he has the upside of the number 5 starter who could also provide a lot of value in the bullpen. Hey, if he's a guy who starts some, then turns into a reliever, but is a good reliever, like that's still a good return for a rental non-closer relief pitcher in Seranthony Dominguez. Even if he doesn't turn into like a number 3 starter at the big leagues, if he's helping you, even if it's in the bullpen, especially if it's next year, Watts-Brown is a good return. And this fits the Orioles mold and their model because he has the traits, right? We've talked about Aracena had the traits of the ability to get swing and miss in the zone. Cameron Foster had the traits of that weird, big-time, over-the-top, very unique delivery. The traits for Watts-Brown, 2 elite breaking balls. They can work on his kick change and make it better. They can work on the fastball. But he's already got 2, not just 1, but 2 60-grade breaking balls as he enters the system. And MLB Pipeline, I mean, it's not my favorite outlet, but they have immediately ranked Watts-Brown as the number 8 prospect in the Orioles system immediately. So they, Callis and those guys over there are very high on him. We'll see how he does to finish out the year in AA. I still think there's a chance the Soto return was slightly better. I would say probably a little bit better. I would say there's just because you're getting more, right? You always worry about pitching returns. Like this could be the downside of this. When you go 1-for-1 with a pitcher, you're putting a lot on one arm to get something back for Dominguez. Now, you're never going to get a gigantic, massive return for a rental setup man. That's just never going to happen. But pitchers get injured so often. I would say personally, I probably like the Soto deal a little bit more, only because you get 2 arms instead of 1. And because there's so many pitching injuries, you almost have to take the approach the Orioles have done in the draft, right? They use the second day of the draft to just draft all pitchers. And it's just because you figure some of them are going to get injured, but some of them are going to pop. And for the Orioles, yes, I like that Watts-Brown has the skills to be and the stuff to potentially be a good pitcher in the major leagues, but I like the trades a little more where you get multiple arms. Now, that doesn't mean you should give up quality to get quantity, but I'd like to thread the needle a little bit more there. And that's why I liked the Orioles kind of getting the higher upside and then the more stable guy and getting 2 pitchers in the Soto deal. Just because, listen, like, if Watts-Brown gets Tommy John surgery in a month, which hopefully it doesn't happen, but it's possible for really any pitcher, you might lose him for, the entirety of this year and the entirety of 2026. And even if he comes back in 27 and beyond, he's probably still pitching in the minors then. Like you're looking at end of 2027. And that really makes this return hurt, especially in the short term. Because if the Orioles were in a rebuild, you're okay with this a little bit more. You can sustain an arm injury. It's a little harder to do that when you're trying to get right back to the postseason in 2026. That's why I just like going for more pitchers in those quantitative trades. But the quality of Watts-Brown is high, and that's clearly why the Orioles went out and really targeted him and got him in this 1-for-1 deal with the Blue Jays. Now, the final thing to talk about with this deal is just my favorite part of deadline deals. This is my favorite thing that happens at the trade deadline. When a player gets traded to the team he is currently facing on that day. And this one was even better because Seranthony Dominguez, who did not pitch in game 1 of the doubleheader, didn't pitch on Monday either, He gets traded in the middle of a doubleheader. So it's not like, it's before a game. He walks over, meets his new teammates, gets ready. He just played a game today against the Blue Jays. And on the same day, he may be active and could potentially, because he didn't pitch in game one, could potentially appear in a game for the Blue Jays against his old team later in the evening. That is just incredible stuff. There was video of him kind of walking through the tunnels in the bowels of Camden Yards, switching clubhouses. That is my favorite thing about the deadline. And it's cool enough when it just happens. It's even cooler when it's the middle of a doubleheader. Here's the kicker for this. Watts-Brown was in Double-A with the Blue Jays. Guess where they are tonight? They are in Bowie facing the Bay Sox. So not only is Dominguez changing dugouts, but down at the Double-A level where Kyle Bradish is set to make his second rehab start, Watts-Brown is also changing dugouts before the game. That is just, that is the perfect trade deadline trade. That's not the deepest analysis you're ever going to get, but that is one of the most enjoyable things for me, at least, seeing these deals at the deadline where you don't have to, put together all the travel in a second. You just hop on with your team, hop on their plane, their bus. It makes it a whole lot easier for these guys as well when they do get dealt. But that'll do it for this live episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. This will go up on audio as well. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I thank you for that. If you're here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. There will still be another episode going out on Wednesday morning. I'll recap both games of the Orioles doubleheader against the Blue Jays, including the dominance in game one, and hopefully it's more dominance in game two as I'm recording here just before first pitch of game two. And then remember, here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, Thursday evening, July 31st, 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time, just after the trade deadline, I will be going live to break down every single move the Orioles make on deadline day. And if they do make a trade on Wednesday, I'll also be back with another episode just like this one. But either way, back on Wednesday to recap Orioles Blue Jays doubleheader. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.